All right, so my name is Artur Kudlacz. I'm from Adobe Basel office. First time at the adaptTo and first time in front of large audience. Nevertheless, super excited. I'm here today with Sharanya.
I'm Sharanya. I'm a senior developer at Adobe, and I've been there for 4 years now and working on the Universal Editor.
Yes, so the title of our presentation today is Edit Anything with the Universal Editor. And that's the product we are working on together with Sharanya and team for some time, and we are super excited to speak about that. So what we are going to tell you today is we're going to do some introduction. Then we are going to speak about the architecture. We will do some deep dive, so for some interesting parts for you. And Sharanya is going to do a super nice demo. And we are also going to tell you some developer kit resources which are going to help you to get started. And at the same time, we are happy to answer some questions if you have some. So why the context matters when editing content? For the content author, when it's editing, everything might look fine, like diesel for successful living or no smoking, safety first. But then when the content lands in the layout, it might look a little bit strange, like for example, die for success or no safety, smoking first. That's why we come up with the Universal Editor, which is solving those problems. And what's also cool about that is that it doesn't require you to use a specific framework. So your app can be implemented in any framework of your choice, whether it's React, Angular, Vue, or any other. The data might come from any source system of your choice. And we also understand how important it is to have some extension points. That's why we implement this product with this matter in mind. So here we have a high-level architecture diagram. And so the moment you open your app inside of the Universal Editor, Universal Editor is going to speak with the app, is going to recognize some elements that can be edited. And because the app is loaded inside of the iframe, it basically follows the regular workflow. So it's going to query your data sources either through REST API or GraphQL or any other API, and it's going to render. Editor is going to recognize those places, is going to create overlays for them. And then the moment you click, you're able to either edit in context or using our advanced side panel, which allows to alternate the data. Then the moment the data is alternated, editor is going to communicate to our service, which then receives a payload, not only with which elements supposed to be edited, but also which plugin to persist the data. So we can edit CQ pages, experience fragments, content fragments, but we are also working on other plugins like to be able to edit Word documents, Excel, or GitHub, or anything else in the future. So what do you need to do to enable your page to be editable? There are only 3 simple steps you have to perform. So the first one is to include our small library, which is establishing connection between your app and the editor, so they can speak 2 ways. Then you are asked to declare connections in the meta header and instrument elements that's supposed to be editable. So let's have a look how it's done in the practice. So in the header, we have one connection defined. It have a prefix of you are an Adobe AEM editor, and after that comes with a name. And the value of this property is we are starting with a plugin which is going to be used by the service to persist the changes, and then to which host actually we want to speak to. And below we have a small snippet containing few properties that can be edited. we tell that we are going to use AEM con that is declared above, and that we want to persist the changes at this specific path, which is content example list item. And below we have also 3 properties. What's interesting there, we not only define what's the property name, but also what's the type of the item. And this type is then mapped to some component that allows editing. So editor basically knows which component to use to edit that. So in this case, we have 2 elements containing text and the one that is able to edit the media. So, all right. So how it looks, how the in-context editing looks like. So as I mentioned, you go to the universal editor. Using the location bar, you are entering the address to your app. Then after confirming, the app gets loaded, the editables are being recognized, overlays are being created, and by double-clicking, we can already go and change the Aloha Spirit in Northern Norway to something else. And by confirming this change, persist action is being performed, and we are speaking to the service, which then knows which plugin to use and what's the value of the modified data, and is performing the change. So again, yeah, that's a little bit similar to what I just said. So again, to recap, we have a connection defined, then we have one element that we want to edit. The payload contains the data, so what's the path of the item and what's the new value and which plugin to use. And then the service performs the change. So basically, editor stays dump, and only new plugins have to be defined in the service itself. So if at one point you will decide to switch from one framework to another, or to source the data from one place to another, it doesn't matter for the editor. Your page still stays editable perfectly fine. And besides of the simple instrumentation, we have few more data attributes that are helping to make editor more user-friendly. So on the right-hand side, we have a small snippet of the structure tree, basically all the elements that can be edited on the page. And instead of showing simply the node name, we can provide a user-friendly name. So in this case, title, for example. And also, besides of being able to edit the nodes, we are providing some additional behavior that can be added to those nodes. So currently we have implemented one, which is component, and it gives the ability to move or delete the node. But we are also working on other behaviors soon to be available. And then besides of those edit actions, of course, it's great to add some new components to the page. We have a way to declare which components you are able to add. We can group them, and you are defining them on the application side, which then using our small library is communicated to the editor. So in the structure tree, after you select a container, and the plus button, you can simply use one of the components that you declared in the app. And how does it look like in this component definition, which, by the way, you can declare either inline or source from external file. You can declare that you, for example, want to use a text component, which is going to use AEM plugin. So it's an information for the service which plugin to use to persist. And it comes with some specific resource type and the default value. All right, so what other advanced features do we have? So besides of inline in-context editing, we can select a larger editable like content fragment, and then all the related fields are being rendered in the right panel, which, as you can see, contains some drop-down, RTE, and all the elements that are basically inside of the content fragment. But not only content fragment, we are basically basing on a model which I will speak a little bit more later. And this form comes with built-in validation. You can also declare your own component, which renders a specific chunk of this properties rail. So if you don't like one RTE, you can switch to another, and so on. And besides of that, we also have built-in debugging, which is great always. And so this panel that you saw comes with some natively supported fields. We can render something similar to what you see in HTML, like an input element, text area for rich text editing, number, some kind of switch. You can also edit JSON blocks, either if it's text area or in a tree view. You can combine those fields into the tabs, and we also have a date, time, and datetime picker, select, checkbox group, radio group, and also fallback in case specific validate or specific renderer is not being registered. And what's also cool is, besides of ability to edit a field, as you can see on the left-hand side, that we have a text field with some value, we can tell that we want to edit some additional parameters, like what kind of type of this element is. And how you do it, in a similar fashion to the component definition, here we have a model definition, and together with instrumentation of specific field, like for example title, we say that besides of the value coming with the title, we would like to render one more field with a set of options. So in this case, we are defining the level of header, and we have few variants to choose from. And with this, I would like to hand over to Sharanya to have some hands-on universal editor.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Artur, for the amazing slides. So yeah, let's take a look at the universal editor in action and see all of the features that were mentioned so far. So for the purpose of this demo, we will be using a simple app. It's a React app. It's getting its content from an AEM instance. And we have a mix of content. So these are content fragments that are being fetched via GraphQL. And at the bottom, we have some content that are CQ page components that are fetched using model.json, as you would have done already for the SPA editor. So this is more just to showcase that you can have different kinds of data and data that is coming from different end systems. So let's take a step back and think from the perspective of an author. So we have multiple pages. I'm just navigating around, and excuse because I think the network is a bit slow, so it might be a little slow. So yeah, so I'm switching around, and I find that I want to make a change on a particular page. So gone are the days where you have to actually go into your ENSO system or like site admin or something and actually try to find the page that you have to make the edit on. It's now as simple as just copying your URL, opening up the universal editor, and you can just put it in here. So let me quickly show you. So it's as simple as how you would do in the browser itself. So you can just put it, and then it should load. But right now I'm already on the page. So this app has the course package already included, and it also has all the elements that are editable instrumented, as Artur already mentioned. So now the universal editor knows what are the editable areas, and it can create the overlays accordingly. So you can see there is some text, there is some adventures, and so on. So all of these are instrumented values. So let's try to do a very simple in-context edit. I'll pick this adventures text for that. So taking a look at the instrumentation first, let's select, and you can see it's just a simple H1. And the items of interest for us are the attributes here. So first, there's the item type. Of course, it's text. This lets the editor know that it's something that can be edited as a text in context. Then the next two things of interest are the item ID and the item prop. The item ID is where the information is actually stored on your system. So in case of AEM, here it is the path to the node on the instance. And there is a prefix here, but we'll come to that later. And the item prop is the name of the property within that node. So now when I make a change, I select, let's say, adventure search, adaptTo, and I save it. You can see from the network. Yeah, let's look at the payload. So of course, there's the new value that you entered. There's the path, which are the 3 attributes. That's the item ID, prop, and item type. But also what's interesting is this connections. So this is the this connections object is the value of that you're providing via your meta tag. So this is also what Artur mentioned earlier. So here, for example, you can see the name AEM connection, and that is the same as what you would provide with your item ID. So this lets the service know that the information to be updated is stored on the system AEM. That is the first part of the value. And the AEM instance is this one. So now the service knows how to structure the data in a format that AEM can understand it, and it passes it on ahead to AEM. And AEM does the appropriate operation, and the changes are persisted. So if I go back to my sample app, you can see that the changes are now saved here. So the advantages of this is that, as already mentioned, this keeps the universal editor very generic. The editor doesn't need to know or care later on if you want to add more end systems, because the request that we are sending out is always the same. And it's only a matter of if you want to add more content systems that you provide those as plugins. So of course, we are providing out-of-the-box support for AEM, but we do have work going on for Google. And if needed, you can also extend it further later on. And even in one page, if you want to have content coming from different AEM instances, that's also possible. It's just a matter of mapping it to the proper meta tag that you provide via your app. So that was a simple use case. But now what if you have a more complicated use case? Like you want to edit something like a reference, for example, something like a content fragment. So here, if I select a content fragment, yeah, it's a bit slow. But so ideally what it should do is it should fetch the model and the data, and it will populate all of the fields inside of the fragment, inside of the rail on the right side. Let me try to refresh. Maybe it's a bit faster then. Yeah, voila, we got it finally. So yeah, so you can see here it displays all of the fields of that particular content fragment. And here the advantage is that if you want to edit items in the content fragment, but not just the ones that you see here. So for example, we see a title, some days, value, the price, and so on. But you also want to edit other things. So if you want to do just a very simplistic edit with all of the fields, you can do it here. But if you want to do some more advanced operations, of course, we have the CF editor. But even for this, like previously, you don't have to go and find the content fragment that corresponds to this particular content on your page. Everything is tied to your page. So once you see it here, you can just click here, and it opens up the content fragment with the appropriate CF. So it helps to make the experience a bit more seamless for the author. They don't have to go around and root around in the source system. Everything is brought together and connected to the page itself. Now, of course, I'm sure you'll be thinking these are all great, but these are still update operations. But what if you want to do some more complicated operations like insertion, deletion, and so on? And yes, of course, we do that. So first, let's take a look at the content tree. So here you can see we have, we display all of the fields that are actually instrumented for editing on the right side. So it helps to get a quick glance at what is possible, what can be edited. And it's also organized hierarchically. But for us, the interest now is this container. So this is a normal CQ page component container, and it has 2 components in it right now. It just has 2 text nodes. So it looks a bit incomplete. I want to add an image to it. So for this, I can select the container and press the add option. As already mentioned, the components that are insertable are groupable. And this component definition is not something that we are defining, but it's something that is totally in your power. It comes from the app itself. So in the app component definition, you can define what are the components that can be inserted in your container. So let's say I just want to do an image insertion. So I click image. And if I take a look at the payload, we have the path. Here, the path would be the information of the container in which the insertion has to be done, connections as we already discussed earlier, and the next would be content. So this is the extra and the interesting part for insertion. So where is this coming from? So this also comes from your component definition. And here you go. So here you see there is the title, the ID, of course, but the next thing is plugins. I hope it's big enough. Maybe, yeah. So here in plugins, you can basically you define how the insertion needs to be handled for different systems. So here I'm doing insertion in AEM, so it's letting the service know that if it's on AEM and if it's a page component, then what is needed for insertion is that we need to know the resource type. That is the resource type of the node to be created. And template is completely optional, but I'm providing it here. So it's just that letting the service know that on insertion and creation of a node, it needs to be created with this particular default value. And that's it. And if you have to do more insertions later on, you just have to define your system and what are the values required by your plugin, basically. So here you see again, the editor just wraps up all this information together and forwards it ahead to the service, and it's up to the service to handle it. And you can see that the image has been created here. If I want to update it, I can also just update. I can do a quick replace. I'm not sure how fast it would be with the internet. Let's try it anyway. So. Yeah, so I can switch it to a different image, and this is same as we discussed earlier. It would trigger an update operation, and it would change the image to what we updated it to. So let's take a look here. Here you go. So now we have inserted something and it's all there, but it's not looking so good. It's not in the right position and you want to move things around. And this, of course, is again possible. Here we come back to what Artur mentioned earlier about the data item behavior. So all of these components have been the ones inside of a container. So you can see it has the data editor behavior component. So basically, the editor knows that when you have some components that's inside of a container and it has this component behavior enabled, these can be manipulated as a component. That is, these can be moved around or deleted and so on. So basically now I can move this image to, let's say, in between the text. So it looks a bit more interesting. And the move operation is again as quite similar to update. It's just that it also has to tell where to move to and what is the container in which the move has to be done to. So it's just basic from and to. And now if I want to just remove it, again, it's similar to update, just that the kind of operation changes, but the information that is being sent is quite similar. Yeah, so this was the basic overview of the fundamental features. Since we have a bit of time, yes?
And we have quite a bit of questions.
Okay.
So
cover.
now the challenge starts. The list is long, so we'll start from the top.
That's not ready. I have one more use case to show. So
just excellent. No, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. We'll cover just one more advanced use case. So and then we switch to the questions. Yes. So this comes to the model that Artur was mentioning about. So here, for example, when I select the title, you can see that we just see the field name and the value. That's default behavior. But what if you want to have more fields, like a dialog, like you want custom fields, you want to edit different attributes like class name, etc. This is also possible. For this, you can provide your own custom model, again, via the app as a JSON definition. So here, let's take a look at the model definition. So here you have an ID, of course, a title, and the different fields that are present inside of that particular model. So for my title model, I just have defined a select field. That's basically a drop-down with different options. And what you would have to do is, so first, the model is reusable, so you can use it for any component that you would need. You just need to map it to your component accordingly. So let's switch quickly. Maybe I show it here so it's easier. Yes. So here you see there is something called data editor item model. So this helps the editor know if there is a component that is being rendered with so and so model item model attribute, then it looks up, fetches the model definition, looks it up, and finds the model that corresponds to it, and then extends the right rail dialog to include this. So this means that if you have already your own default model like a content fragment would have, we would not just override it, but it would more be an extension. So you would get a combination of both of the models. So for example, here the title tag here is by default H1, but you want to give your authors the flexibility to be able to change this. So you can, I as an author can just select the H6 and it would do an update operation and it would update the attribute, and as you can see, it switches it up. So you can see the possibilities with this, like you can do class names and whatever, and it's configure it so that your authors have the most power to make the changes that they would want. And yes, we are in the yellow, so I stop now. I hope it was interesting to you. We have just some developer kit resources if you are interested after the session, if you would like to read it up. So on Experience League, we have quite a bit of documentation. The sample app that we just saw is up on GitHub. Please take a look. It has all of the instrumentation. It's also deployed. And if you would like to try out fetching content fragments, that's also available on Experience League documentation. And before we get started with the Q&A, there are some frequently asked questions, so I'll just get ahead of the curve and answer those. So the first one is always, is 6.5 supported? Not yet. Right now, we just support cloud service, but it is on the roadmap, so don't worry. So we would be working on it sooner rather than later. So yeah, hopefully. And the next is the editor already available to try out? So currently it's only available as part of the VIP program. So if you go to Experience League, we have the link to the editor and it has a contact form. Please fill in the information and we would review your use case and get back to you. But we are very interested to hear from you, especially over the next 3 days we'll be here. So ask all the questions. We would really like to understand the use cases that would really make a difference to the authors and the developers out there. And the last one is, can custom components be used? And yes, of course, custom components can be used. I mean, that was one of the main requirements in creating the universal editor, that you are no longer restricted by the framework that you're using, that where's the rendering happening, nothing at all. So you can do your components as you would like. The editor doesn't know or care about how the rendering is happening, just about the final DOM representation and if the attributes are present or not. And other than that, everything is up to you. So it gives quite a bit of flexibility. And now we go to the Q&A. Yes.
Excellent. And as you can see, we do some load testing because we have so many questions here. So let's get started. Thomas wants to know, are you planning to open source the editor to invite community to contribute like Sanity Studio?
I think that's above our pay grade. We don't know.
Excellent answer, yeah. Do you also have something in place for those cases where it's not easily or even possible to add additional attributes like the item prop or other markup to the output elements? How would you go and make these pieces of content editable?
Yeah, so for now we are bound to those data attributes, but I think we were thinking also about creating those script snippets, like in a similar fashion, like you define the additional model or components that we could make those elements instrumented somewhere else, so not directly on the DOM.
Okay. Robin wants to know, doesn't the usage of HTML attributes, item type, item prop, clashes with the schema.org standards? For example, does the item type of item type equals http.schema.org-product work?
Yeah, it is. And
yeah, we are thinking about it. I think item type also allows multiple values. So we are thinking maybe that's a possibility that maybe we can figure out how to overcome this clash. But yeah, you have to understand this is something that is quite like something that is being actively updated and changed. So this is also something that we realized and we are trying to.
We are still experimenting.
Yeah. So this is the perfect time to come to us with use cases because we are very much in the next.
Exactly. We would like to hear from you and we will incorporate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Does the metadata needs to be part of the public site?
No, it doesn't. It just has to be when it's loaded in the universal editor.
So maybe just to add, the library you're adding to your page is basically going to tell you if you are inside of universal editor or not. So instrumentation can happen on the fly, and same with the meta tag. So basically, you don't need to tell the world all about stuff that is required only for the universal editor.
Alex would like to know, can you clarify a bit more how this differs from the current editor? It currently seems very similar, with some differences in configuration, components, grouping versus policies, and the UI. I would still need to switch views for different contexts, which the current editor would happen via browser tools.
So the current editor, I think, historically, if you look at it, the old page editor was more about experiences, like you have to use JSPs and so on, and it is the content is still living on AEM. And then there came the need for SPAs, so with React apps and so on, which is when we had the SPA editor, which even though was not a new product, it was just an extension of the old page editor, but it was supporting two frameworks. And then there came the ask that people wanted to use the SPA, but not keep the content or host everything on AEM, which is when we brought the remote SPA editor. And right now, there is 3 different things which solve 3 very different problems. So the universal editor is more about a combination of the 3. Like it's providing more flexibility, and it's about editing content in context. You don't have, I think one of the main problems was people didn't want to follow a particular structure, that when you migrate your old app, you had to conform to the AEM pattern. So here, there is no need for that anymore. You can follow your own pattern. You don't have to, of course, in our world, the frameworks are changing quite rapidly. So if you want to move from one to another, again, you are no longer constrained. You don't have to be client side or server side rendered. Like, you don't have to make these decisions based on your editor, but rather how you want to do your rendering, we give you full power on that. And for editing, it makes things more easy. Like, we give you more options to configure it, to edit it. But I think the old page editor and this solves very different use cases. So there are use cases where the old editor is still very powerful with the template editor, and it has a lot of functionalities. So I think it's 2 very different things, and it still matters based on your use case what would be the best fit for you right now. But I think it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, I would say.
Now a follow-up question. When the content is not edited inside AEM, but instead like another system, would it be realistic to make API calls based on the values that come from the in-place editing controls and the components dialog? Or is this a feature that is merely made for persisting into AEM?
No. So basically, we are implementing different plugins, and besides of AEM, we also try to persist changes in GitHub, for example, directly. So we have authentication information required to use specific source system, and while declaring connection, so we preceded that with AEM. But let's say we want to persist in GitHub, we proceed with GitHub, and then we give repository name and username. And behind the scenes, service is basically performing all the persist actions. So no, we are not bound to AEM only.
Okay.
And we have a simple API in order to implement yet another source system.
Konrad would like to know, is the AEM extension using the Sling Post servlet to persist changes in AEM or some other endpoint?
Right now, the service is using the Sling Post servlet, yes.
The Sling Post servlet, thanks. What is the roadmap to add the correct properties to the AEM core components?
I don't know.
I mean, we did a POC, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So our team tried instrumenting it just to understand how difficult it would be or how simple it would be before we kind of recommend it for people who are trying it out. And they mentioned, so the team reported that it took like maybe a day. So it's not a super complicated thing. And once you do it for a component, it's there. So I don't know about the official plans. That's something maybe we would have to discuss internally with the teams. But at least if you already have the core components, it's not a big thing to instrument it. It's at most, I think, a day or maximum 2, I would say.
And I would say for this question and other that we might not have answer, we can either answer through the app, or we are here until Wednesday,
Yes.
and then you can still reach us through the email,
Yeah.
so we can gather answers.
Exactly.
course.
That's what we're going to do. Thank you for having you on stage.
Yeah.
Thank you
very
so much.
I hope you liked it. Yes.